Hi everyone, Ian here, and in today's video I want to talk about the M5 monitor from Shimbol, a new 5.5-inch color calibrated 1080p display with 1200 nits of brightness, great build quality and some fantastic features, all at a price under £200. And honestly, this may be the best bang for buck monitor on the market. So let's break it down and take a closer look. So what makes this neat little monitor stand out from the rest? Well, first, let's look at the build quality. And I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the materials and feel of this monitor. The chassis is lightweight, coming in at around 278 grams without a battery, and the aviation aluminium body feels durable and precise in its engineering. There's smooth rounded edges and no flex to the body. It feels durable and lightweight without feeling fragile. And from a design aesthetic, I really like the gunmetal grey. It reminds me of the Sony FX line. And I think a monitor like this is going to pair brilliantly with cameras of that ilk. So the FX6, the FX3, and cameras like the Canon C70 and Red Komodo. Now, even though this is a cheaper monitor, Shimbol haven't negated functionality. If anything, it's got some of the most practical design that I've seen on any 5.5-inch monitor, even when compared to the much more expensive competition. On the base, we have a standard mounting point. This uses a 1/4-inch thread as standard, but it also has 2 locking pins built straight into the body. Finally, thank you Shimbol for being a company that implements locating pins. This is such a simple and straightforward addition to a monitor, and I wish more companies implemented it as standard. So bravo Shimbol. To the side of the mounting point, we have a USB-C input, and this is reserved for firmware updates. And it's good to see the USB-C connection being implemented, because the fewer cables I need to carry across different electronics, the better. On the left-hand side, we have DC mains input if you wish to power the monitor from mains power. However, do note that no power cable comes with the monitor by default. This side also houses a HDMI input and output point. And this is great because it means we can loop and feed to a second monitor if required. But it also gives us more options for adding a wireless video transmission system to the monitor, and this pairs really well with one of Shimbol's new wireless video transmission systems, the TP Mini. On the right hand side of the chassis, we have a headphone jack for monitoring audio, an SD card slot for importing our own custom LUTs, and a second 1/4-inch screw thread allowing for additional mounting points. Now at first glance, I didn't think this mounting location had any locking pins, but when I took a closer look, I realized that there's actually some indents molded into the metal at the edges of the thread position. And sure enough, when I attached a ball head with locking pins, the slots provide just enough depth to stop the screw from rotating. So again, Shimbol, bravo. This is such a good use of design and functionality. And it's these small decisions which provide real-world comforts. On the back of the M5, we have the MPF battery plate, and this is a true tried and tested battery solution for monitors. And the M5 has really good power consumption, with a maximum of 7 watts, and with a 970 MPF battery, you can expect to get around 6 hours per charge. So a couple of batteries should last you the whole day. Finally, along the top, we have 4 function buttons. One turns the monitor on and off, while the additional 3 can be used as function buttons to enable and disable exposure and monitoring guides. And again, I think this was a really good decision by Shimbol. Touchscreens are great, and the one on this monitor works really well, and it's very responsive. But it's always useful to have some physical buttons which allow you to gain quick access to your most commonly used tools. For me, there's a more tactile feel to using buttons, which provides an immediacy without having to navigate through multiple menu subheadings. So with this monitor, you get the best of both worlds. It doesn't compromise. You get a great touchscreen as well as good physical buttons. Now, alongside the monitor, you also get some really useful accessories. To protect and transport the monitor, you get this really good hardshell case with foam inserts. And inside, you'll get a strong ball head mount with locking pins, a glass screen protector, which I've already applied, and it appears to be of really good quality and left no air bubbles, a full-size HDMI to HDMI, a micro to full-size HDMI, ideal for mirrorless cameras, a cleaning cloth, and a basic setup guide. This is more than you get with many other monitors at this price point, and even at much higher price ranges. And again, these accessories are functional items which enable you to utilize the monitor more effectively straight out of the box. So not needing to purchase additional assets and knowing the monitor will be protected from the get-go is definitely welcomed. So turning on the monitor, we're met by a 1200 nit Full HD IPS touchscreen display, and this is a vibrant and sharp and easy to view display, even in direct sunlight. And it comes out of the factory with a professional Kalman color calibration for accurate color reproduction. And this gives us 100% for X709 and a delta E of 0.6. And this gives you a more realistic interpretation of the color present in the frame. The M5 also supports up to 4K 30p HDR monitoring with a built-in HLG mode. And in addition to the strong performance of the screen, the M5 also has a simple and straightforward UI, which is quick and easy to navigate, while still hosting a substantial array of monitoring and exposure tools. And this is something which I often think monitors fail at. Too many times have I experienced monitors with cluttered menu systems, which consist of multiple swipes up and down and left and right, to enter and exit multiple headings and subheadings, a task which can be laborious when trying to quickly navigate across a wide array of functions, often making what should be a quick and simple task onerous and time-consuming. Once again, Shimbol have struck a nice balance between design, ease of use, and function. And with that, let's dive into the menu and look at each parameter more closely. Okay, so with a quick push of the power button, we'll see the monitor turn on and automatically connect to the camera. And this will take around 10 to 20 seconds. So on the main panel, we have our screen resolution in the top left corner and our battery percentage measured in volts in the top right hand corner. And this has a little icon, so you should be able to get a clear idea of when the battery is about to die. At middle left, we have a screen flip button, and this is obviously useful if you need to mount the monitor in an inverted position. And in the lower right, we have our left and right audio channels. These audio levels are colourful and provide a good range of visible decibel levels, which makes it easier to measure a range of sounds. Finally, at the lower left and moving into the center, we have our tools. And this is where we can access our monitor, exposure, focus, and compositional tools. Now, all this display information can be hidden by simply tapping across any space of the screen, and tapping it again will bring the UI back. So first, we have the scope menu. This allows us to turn on 4 different exposure monitoring tools: the waveform, an RGB panel, the histogram, and a vector scope. Each of these has an opacity meter to adjust its transparency on the screen, and multiple tools can be turned on at the same time. The only caveat to this is that while the vector scope and histogram can be enabled at the same time, the waveform and RGB panel have to be enabled separately. This means you can have up to 3 separate tools enabled on screen from this menu at any given time. Now, unfortunately, none of these tools can have their size adjusted or their placement altered, and I think this could be a useful feature for Shimbol to include in future firmware updates. Now, I'm not going to cover what each of these parameters do in this video, as I've already done that in multiple other videos, and I'll leave links to those in the description below. And while I sometimes still use a waveform and RGB panel, I rarely use a histogram or vector scope when on set. My primary exposure tool these days is false color, of which I'll talk about in greater length when we enter that menu. But regardless, the options are here should these be your preferred methods of exposing. The next tab is the marker menu. And in here, we have a range of marker parameters for different instances, and each marker can be turned on and off individually. The safe area allows us to set a safe area for both the action and subtitle safe zones, and this safe parameter can be set to different colors and widths. Now, the standard action safe area for modern TVs these days is 93%, while the standard subtitle safe zone is 90. This used to be 80, but since around 2009, this was redefined as 90. So these would be the two options I'd choose should I need to enable them. However, if you still wanted 80% for the subtitles and the older 90% for the action safe area, these two options are also both available. The grid line has 3 grids to choose from, a 9, 16 and 25 panel grid, and these will help with composition and can be especially useful for interviews or when wanting to frame symmetrically. And these are the most common use cases in my workflow. Following this, you also have an anamorphic squeeze option, and this supports all of the most common desqueeze factors. And it's good to see a times 1.8 and times 2 option, as these values can often be omitted on other monitors and cameras. Tapping the next arrow, we also have 3 additional functions on the second page. From here, the marker tool lets you enable 4 aspect ratios by default. 16:9 is the standard aspect ratio for modern HD televisions, while 4:3 is an old Academy ratio for analog film, and was then adopted for television as the standard format in the 1940s until the introduction of 16:9 in modern televisions in the 1990s. 15:9 and 13:9 are odd aspect ratios, and from what I can tell, 15:9 is an aspect ratio on some older LCD TVs, which basically cuts off the edges of the 16:9 ratio, while the 13:9 option I can't really find much information on, so in truth I'm not really sure what that aspect ratio does. Fortunately, we can input our own aspect ratios via the custom user area. For example, if you wanted an aspect ratio of 2.4:1, which is the classic widescreen ratio, you'd want to input 1920x804, and this would give you the correct aspect ratio. After that, we have a center marker, which we can change the color and adjust the width of. And finally, we have the mask tool, and this directly correlates to the aspect markers. We can have the aspect ratio mask set at 0, 50 or 100, making the mask more transparent or more opaque. Next, we have the focus mode window, and here we have peaking and zoom. Peaking aids a user in gaining focus by placing colored lines in the plane of focus, and within here we can choose from different peaking colors and the sensitivity of the peaking lines. A lower percentage value means the peaking lines will be less prominent and will not pick up as many areas unless incredibly sharp, while a higher number will make the peaking lines more prominent and will pick up a greater range of areas which are deemed to be sharp. As a good rule of thumb, I normally set peaking sensitivity on most cameras and monitors to a lower percentage value, and on the M5, that's somewhere between 20 to 30%. Now the M5 also has a decent zoom magnification. When this is enabled, you'll notice a magnifying glass with a plus icon appears in the upper center of the screen. Once enabled, you can pinch to zoom and use the touch panel to move around the frame. This is responsive and works really well, and the magnification is easy to gain focus with. However, in future firmware updates, I'd love to see a double tap function which could maybe enable and disable the zoom function, and perhaps some additional zoom information at the side of the screen just to indicate to the user that they are in fact zoomed in, as currently there's not much information to show that this is the case. Next, we have the exposure menu, and this is where we can adjust our zebra, false color, and enable a monochrome function. The zebra pattern allows us to set a maximum and minimum range for the zebra level. This means we can pinpoint a specific brightness value, allowing for greater accuracy with the zebra function. But it also keeps the overall frame cleaner by not throwing zebras across a large variance of brightness levels. You could still do this, of course. For example, if I set my maximum at 90 and my minimum at 10, you'll see the zebra lines appear across pretty much all areas of the frame. But if I wanted to measure only middle grey for C-Log on the Canon C70, for example, I could set my maximum to 35 and my minimum to 30. And now we have a much smaller variance of brightness levels being measured, and the zebras are only appearing on the middle grey exposure points. So next we have false color, And while this is great to see, this false color mode is pretty limited in its application, and that's because it can't be customized. Most camera and picture profiles reference different exposure values at different IRE levels. For example, the middle gray value in C-Log is different to that of the Sony FX6, and the FX6 is different to the Blackmagic Pocket 6K, and the Blackmagic is different to the Red Komodo. This means a generic false color scale which is not adaptive or customizable to the specific camera's picture profile, in practice can be more difficult and cumbersome to use. For example, the middle grey IRE value is normally universally linked to green on most false color scales, but we have no idea what the IRE value is for green on the M5 monitor, so it won't necessarily map to middle grey on that particular picture profile. Similarly, pink universally represents correct exposure for Caucasian skin tones, and again we have no reference for the IRE value of this monitor scale, so it potentially won't map correctly. Now, this false color customization is an issue on a lot of monitors at different price points, so I'd love to see this addressed in a future firmware update. Make the false color scale larger and include IRE values for all of the colors. Have it visible across the lower part of the screen and make it customizable, allowing a user to input IRE values for all of those specific colors. These small changes would make it incredibly usable and honestly the perfect exposure tool. At the moment, if you have false color built directly into the camera, use that instead, as it will be accurately mapped to the camera's sensor and picture profile. The next tab in this area is the monochrome feature. This allows you to view individual color channels of the image, and this can be useful when observing the blue channel, as this is a channel which will often hold a larger portion of the image's noise and grain. Being able to enable different color channels means you can check to see if a channel is producing a noticeable amount of grain. The next window, the color menu, looks at LUTs. The M5 has an SD card slot which allows a user to input custom LUTs, but we also have different camera LUTs built directly into the monitor, and these presets are plentiful and cover a wide array of cameras, from Sony S-Log and Canon C-Log to Panasonic V-Log and Red 3G10. And when testing these against official presets, they sit very closely, so I'd feel very comfortable using these straight out of the box. The user preset is where you'll find custom LUTs, which have been added via the SD card. The gamma panel interestingly gives us the option to switch the screen's gamma curve between 3 industry profiles. For modern Rec 709 viewing, Gamma 2.4 is now classed as a standard for HD delivery broadcast. This was chosen based on the viewing parameters of most modern households, in which people watch TVs in more dimly lit environments. Gamma 2.2 is more widely used in typically well-lit environments, such as office spaces, and is designed for viewing parameters when there is direct daylight. Think exterior windows letting light in. And as such, Gamma 2.2 is used widely on computer monitors from both Windows and Mac, and is still sometimes preferred for smartphones, as many people tend to use their phones outside or in brighter environments when compared to how they view their home televisions. Gamma 2.2 brightens the shadows on the viewing monitor so they don't become mushy, and using Gamma 2.2 can also help the image fight glare, which may appear due to the brighter environment. Finally, Gamma 2.6 is designed to be used in totally black environments, think movie theaters, in which very little additional light will be present, so Gamma 2.6 is the preferred delivery for DCI outputs. Gamma 2.6 will produce more contrast on the screen than Gamma 2.2 and 2.4. And basically, these settings mean that you can set the monitor to your chosen shooting environment to get a better gauge for your image. If you're outside shooting, set the gamma to 2.2. If you're in a dimly lit environment, set it to 2.4. And if you're shooting in dark lighting conditions, choose 2.6. The monitor also has 2 of the most popular HDR display platforms in HLG, Hybrid Log Gamma, and PQ. And furthermore, you can also adjust the screen's color temperature to either 5600 Kelvin or 6500 Kelvin. The settings window has 4 subheadings. In display, we can adjust all our regular parameters. Brightness, contrast, and saturation set at 50% by default, while the sharpness default is 0. And I'd recommend always keeping this at 0 as the screen is perfectly sharp and doesn't need any additional sharpness. From this window, you can also adjust the red, green, and blue channels individually. However, I rarely change these as I found the screen closely matches my camera's image. In settings, we can adjust the scan between normal and underscan, and I normally keep mine as normal. We can adjust the audio volume for headphone monitoring. We can format the SD card, which can be used for importing those custom LUTs. And we can also adjust the backlight, with 50% being the default. And when using this inside, I've never needed to go any higher than 50%. And when outside on a bright sunny day, I've set my gamma to 2.2 and had the backlight set to around 75 to 90%. And this has allowed me to confidently view the image. Moving on from this, the function window is where we can set tools for our 3 physical buttons. Tapping into a function area brings up the list of available tools, and you can simply pick one and it will be set to that parameter. And normally I'll set one of these to zoom, one to LUT, and the final parameter will often change between peaking, false color, waveform, or markers, depending on my needs for that particular shoot. Finally, the system window provides us with our language, software update, and reset functions. The lock button also does as it suggests. It locks a screen, with the icon remaining in place for when you need to unlock it. So what are some of the cons? Well, the ecosystem of the brand is still quite new in terms of monitor accessories, so rigs such as cages may be more difficult to come by. However, this is only a minor gripe, as you could easily use a universal cage. Plus, the monitor also has some great mounting options built directly into the chassis. Another minor gripe for me is the battery release. The push-down tab feels secure and sturdy, but it needs to be pushed down evenly in the middle to avoid the release catch from protruding and stopping the battery from being released. And this can sometimes be a little cumbersome. However, after a while, you do get a feel for the pressure and movement, so while it's a little finicky initially, it does get better and easier the more you use it. As I mentioned earlier, I'd also love to see some of the tools such as the waveform and RGB panel have size and movement parameters available, just to give me the option to position them across different areas of the frame, or to scale up or scale them down when needed. Furthermore, I'd love to see an adjustable false color scale, allowing the user to dial in their own IRE percentage values against specific colors. This would allow us to match and customize the false color scale to certain cameras and sensors. Other companies are currently not doing this, so it would be the perfect opportunity to implement such a feature into the monitor. It would make this external false color more useful and practical across a larger range of cameras, and this would be particularly useful for smaller mirrorless cameras, which often lack built-in false color tools. False color is now one of the most widely used tools for measuring exposure, so the more customization available, the better it becomes from a user's point of view. Finally, I'd love to see an SDI variant of this monitor become available, as it could be used more easily across camera lines from Sony and Red. This monitor has such a lot of good things going for it that it's no longer the case that you need to pay above and beyond for a good user experience. Because remember, for under £200, you get a monitor with a metal build, HDMI loop out, multiple mounting options, a bright, sharp, color calibrated touchscreen, excellent battery life, a simple and effective UI, fantastic monitoring tools, and useful accessories included in the box. So honestly, I think the M5 is punching in a weight class far above its price point. And for me, I'd happily recommend the M5 regardless of whether you're just starting out and have a small budget, or you've been doing this for a while and want to dip your toe into a new brand. Now, I've put an Amazon link in the description below where you can purchase the Shimbol M5, and this isn't an affiliate link. I don't get any money from this. It's just the easiest way to pick up this monitor across different countries. So if you want to buy it, you can always check it out from that link. Finally, I just want to say a big thank you to the YouTube community for your continued support. This channel keeps growing week by week, and it's great to see so many people engaged and learning. So if you want to see more content, remember to hit that subscribe button to keep the channel growing. And until next time, keep being creative, and I'll see you soon.